I was standing in my kitchen, staring at my phone screen, when my entire world tilted on its axis. The email from Ancestry DNA sat in my inbox like a ticking bomb. Its subject line, innocent enough: "Your DNA results are ready." I had taken the test on a whim 3 months earlier, caught up in the genealogy craze that had swept through my book club. My younger sister, Emma, had done the same, and we'd laughed about potentially discovering we were descended from royalty or Vikings. We joked that maybe we'd finally figure out where Mom got her stubborn streak and Dad got his terrible sense of direction. But as I clicked open that email and scrolled through the results, my hands began to tremble. Because right there in cold clinical data was something that made absolutely no sense. According to the DNA analysis, Emma and I shared only 25% of our genetic material. We weren't full sisters. We were half-sisters. And when I called Emma, her voice shaking as badly as mine, she confirmed what I already suspected. Her results showed the exact same thing. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears as one question thundered through my mind: which one of us didn't belong? The first person I wanted to call was Mom, but something stopped me. Some instinct, some small voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "Not yet. Not until you understand what this means." So instead, I sat down at my kitchen table, Emma still on the phone, both of us breathing heavily into our respective receivers like we'd just run a marathon. Outside my window, the Seattle rain fell in its typical November drizzle, the sky the color of old bruises. It felt appropriate somehow, like the weather was matching the sudden darkness that had descended over my life. "Sarah," Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does this mean? How is this possible?" I was 34 years old. Emma was 29. We'd grown up in the same house in Spokane, Washington, raised by the same two parents, Richard and Catherine Morrison. We had the same childhood memories: family vacations to Yellowstone, Christmas mornings opening presents by the fireplace, Dad teaching us to ride bikes in the driveway while Mom took pictures. I could remember the day Emma was born, how I'd stood on my tiptoes to peek into her bassinet at the hospital, how her tiny fingers had wrapped around my index finger, how I'd promised to always be her big sister. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we need to figure this out. Should we call Mom and Dad?" The hesitation in her voice mirrored my own uncertainty. Dad had passed away 2 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving a hole in our family that still ached like a fresh wound. Mom had retreated into herself after his death, becoming quieter, more distant. She'd moved from our childhood home into a small condo in downtown Spokane, claiming the big house held too many memories. Emma and I had respected her grief, given her space, visited regularly but not intrusively. Now I wondered if there was more to her withdrawal than simple mourning. "Let's start with Mom," I said. "Just Mom, I don't want to..." "I don't know. Broadcast this until we understand what we're dealing with." We agreed to drive to Spokane that weekend. I lived in Seattle, working as a freelance graphic designer, while Emma had stayed closer to home, teaching 3rd grade in a suburb of Spokane. The 3-hour drive felt both too long and too short. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Had Mom had an affair? Had Dad? Was one of us adopted? But we both had birth certificates listing Richard and Catherine Morrison as our parents. We'd seen them, used them to get passports and driver's licenses. How could they be wrong? When Saturday arrived, I picked Emma up from her apartment. She looked as sleepless as I felt, dark circles under her green eyes that suddenly seemed different from my brown ones in a way they never had before. We'd always known we looked different. Emma had gotten Dad's lighter coloring, his blonde hair and fair skin, while I'd inherited Mom's darker features, her olive complexion and nearly black hair. But we'd shared Dad's smile, or so we'd always thought. Now I found myself studying Emma's face like I was seeing it for the first time, looking for similarities and finding mostly differences. The drive passed in tense silence, punctuated by bursts of nervous conversation. We went over our strategy. We'd present the results calmly, give Mom a chance to explain, try not to be accusatory. But beneath our careful planning, I could feel a current of fear and anger building. Someone had lied to us. Someone had kept a secret that fundamentally changed who we were. Mom's condo was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. So different from the warm, cluttered house where we'd grown up. She answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I realized she already looked nervous. Had she been expecting this? Had she known this day would come? "Girls," she said, stepping aside to let us in. "This is a surprise. You didn't tell me you were both coming." "We need to talk to you, Mom," I said. And something in my voice made her face go pale. We sat in her minimalist living room. And I pulled out the printed DNA results I'd brought with me. Mom's hands trembled as she took the papers, her eyes scanning the data. The silence stretched out so long I thought I might scream. When she finally looked up, there were tears streaming down her face. "I knew this would happen eventually," she whispered. "Once those DNA tests became popular, I knew. I just hoped. I prayed I'd have more time." "Time for what?" Emma's voice was sharp, hurt. "Time to keep lying to us?" Mom flinched like she'd been slapped. "I never wanted to lie. You have to understand. Everything I did to protect this family." "Then tell us the truth," I demanded. "Now, all of it." Mom stood up and walked to the window, her back to us, her shoulders shaking. When she spoke, her voice was so soft we had to lean forward to hear her. "Your father, Richard, he couldn't have children. We found out 2 years after we got married. It devastated him. He felt like less of a man, like he was failing me. Back then, in the early 80s, the options were limited. IVF was new and expensive. Adoption had waiting lists years long. We were desperate, and then..." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "Then a friend told me about a doctor who could help. Dr. Lawrence Bennett. He ran a fertility clinic in Portland. He promised he could make our dreams come true." My stomach dropped. I'd read stories about fertility doctors who'd used their own sperm instead of donors, who'd lied to couples desperate for children. "Mom, what did he do?" She turned around, and her face was a mask of anguish. "He said he'd find the perfect donor for us. Someone who matched Richard's profile, his height, coloring, intelligence. He showed us profiles, and we picked one that seemed right. I got pregnant with you, Sarah, and we were so happy. Richard was over the moon. You were his daughter in every way that mattered. But..." Emma prompted, her voice breaking. "But 5 years later, when we wanted another child, Dr. Bennett's clinic had closed. There were rumors, investigations. We were terrified, but we couldn't find any documentation about your donor, Sarah. Everything was gone. So we found another clinic, another donor. That's how we had you, Emma. Different donors. Same parents. At least that's what we thought." I felt like the floor was falling away beneath me. "What do you mean, that's what you thought?" Mom sank back into her chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. 3 years ago, before your father died, I got a letter. It was from a lawyer representing a man named Dr. Lawrence Bennett. He died, and in his will, he left instructions for letters to be sent to certain former patients. The letter said..." She swallowed hard. "It said that Dr. Bennett had used his own sperm for the inseminations. For all of them. There were dozens of us, maybe more. He'd fathered countless children without anyone's knowledge or consent." The room spun. I gripped the arm of the couch, trying to process what I was hearing. You're saying this doctor is my biological father. Some stranger who violated your trust and Dad's trust, and..." I couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm so sorry," Mom sobbed. "I showed your father the letter. It nearly destroyed him. He wanted to tell you both, but he was so ashamed, so hurt. We fought about it constantly. And then he had the heart attack, and I always wondered if the stress..." She couldn't continue. Emma was crying now too, silent tears running down her face. "So we have different fathers. Sarah's biological father is this doctor, this monster, and mine is some anonymous donor?" "I don't know who your father is, Emma," Mom admitted. "The second clinic we used was legitimate, but it was anonymous donation. All I have is a donor number." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Emma, my sister, my half-sister, and saw the same confusion and pain I felt mirrored in her expression. But beneath it all, I felt something else. A strange sense of validation. Because if I was being honest, I'd always felt different. Not in any way I could articulate, but like there was some part of me that didn't quite fit the Morrison family mold. I'd always attributed it to personality, to the normal variations between family members. But maybe it had been something deeper. Maybe some part of me had always known. Are there others? I asked, my voice hollow. Other half-siblings? Mom nodded miserably. The letter said there might be. The lawyer included information about a support group, a DNA database specifically for Bennett's victims. I never accessed it. I was too afraid. But it's there if you want to find them. I stood up, needing to move, needing to process. I walked to the window and stared out at the gray Spokane afternoon. Somewhere out there I had siblings I'd never met. Half-siblings who shared my biological father. A man who'd violated the trust of desperate couples, who'd spread his genes like some kind of grotesque experiment. I thought about Dad, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up all night helping me with my science fair project, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding. He'd known in those final years that I wasn't his biological daughter. And yet he'd never treated me differently, never loved me less. Did Dad know about you, Emma? I turned to look at my sister. Did he know you weren't his biological daughter either? Mom shook her head. No, we always thought Emma was from the legitimate donor. We had no reason to think otherwise. But the DNA test shows we're only half-siblings, Emma said slowly, working through the implications. Which means we only share one biological parent. If Sarah's biological father is Dr. Bennett, and mine is the anonymous donor, then the only parent we share is me, Mom finished. I'm your only genetic connection to each other. Something in her voice made me turn around sharply. There was another layer to this. Something she still wasn't saying. Mom, what aren't you telling us? She looked at me with such devastation that I almost told her to stop. That I didn't want to know. But I'd come too far now. We all had. The letter from Dr. Bennett's lawyer. It included DNA test results from samples taken during my pregnancies that Dr. Bennett had kept. He was a monster in more ways than one. He kept biological samples from all of us. Her voice was shaking now. The results showed that Sarah, you are definitely Dr. Bennett's biological daughter. But Emma ... She turned to my sister, tears streaming down her face. Emma, the DNA showed you weren't related to me at all. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but my brain couldn't process their meaning. Emma stood up slowly, her face completely white. What are you saying? She whispered. I'm saying that somehow, at the second clinic, there was a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. The embryo they implanted in me wasn't created with my egg. It was someone else's. You're not my biological daughter, Emma. You're not Richard's daughter. You're... Her voice broke entirely. I don't know who your biological parents are. The silence that followed was absolute. I couldn't hear the rain anymore. Couldn't hear the traffic outside. Couldn't hear anything except the sound of Emma's breathing fast and shallow. Like she was drowning. I'm not your daughter, Emma repeated, her voice robotic. I'm not Sarah's sister. I'm not a Morrison at all. You are my daughter. Mom was on her feet now, reaching for Emma, but Emma backed away. Biology doesn't matter. I carried you for 9 months. I was there for your first breath, your first word, your first step. I raised you. I love you. You are my daughter in every way that matters. But Emma was shaking her head, still backing toward the door. You lied to me my entire life. Both of you. Dad knew about Sarah and you knew about me and you let me think I belonged to this family. You do belong. I said, finding my voice finally. Emma, you're my sister. Nothing changes that. Everything changes that. Emma shouted, and I'd never heard her sound so angry, so hurt. Don't you get it, Sarah? You're still a Morrison. You're still Mom's biological daughter. You're still connected to Dad through her. But me? I'm nobody. I'm some mistake from a fertility clinic? I don't have a family. I don't have a history. I don't even know who I am." She ran then, yanking open the door and fleeing down the hallway. I started to follow, but Mom grabbed my arm. "Let her go," she said softly. "She needs time." "Time for what? To hate us? To hate you?" I pulled my arm free, angry at Mom, angry at Dad, angry at the doctors who'd played God with people's lives. How could you keep this from us? How could you let Emma grow up thinking she was part of this family when you knew she wasn't? Because she is part of this family. Mom's voice rose to match mine. "Sarah, listen to me. When I got that letter, when I found out about Emma, I was devastated. But then I realized something. I had carried her in my body. I had fed her, changed her, stayed up with her when she was sick. I had loved her every single day of her life. And so had your father. He was her daddy, Sarah. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. By love. Isn't that what really matters?" I wanted to agree. Part of me knew she was right. But another part of me, the part that was reeling from my own revelations, couldn't quite accept it. Because at least I knew who I was. I was Catherine Morrison's biological daughter. I was Dad's daughter through Mom. I was Emma's half-sister. But Emma? Emma was adrift in a way I couldn't fully understand. I left Mom's condo without another word and drove to Emma's apartment. She wouldn't answer the door, wouldn't respond to my calls or texts. For 3 days, I tried to reach her, leaving voicemails that went unanswered, sending messages that showed as read but received no reply. Finally, on the 4th day, she called me. "I accessed the database," she said without preamble. "The one for Dr. Bennett's children." "I found them, Sarah. I found your half-siblings." My heart stopped. "Emma, you don't have to. There are 37 of them," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. 37 other people who share your biological father. They have a Facebook group. They've been looking for each other for years. Some of them grew up together without knowing they were related. Some of them dated. One couple almost got married before they found out they were half-siblings. Her voice was bitter, hollow. "Isn't that twisted? Your father was such a narcissist, such a megalomaniac, that he created this huge web of people who'll be dealing with the consequences for generations. Emma, please come over. Let's talk about this face to face." "I'm not done," she said. "I also registered with every DNA database I could find. Not just looking for Bennett's children, but looking for any genetic matches. Looking for my real family." "And Sarah?" "I found them. I found my biological parents." I sat down heavily on my couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "What?" "Their names are Jennifer and Michael Reeves. They live in Sacramento. They had fertility treatments at the same clinic where Mom and Dad went for me. They had a daughter through IVF the exact same month Mom was pregnant with me. Her name is Rachel." Emma's voice cracked. "Sarah, I have a twin sister. An identical twin. We were split up as embryos. One was implanted in Jennifer Reeves, and one was implanted in Mom. Someone at the clinic mixed up the embryos, and no one ever caught the mistake." I couldn't breathe. Emma ... I talked to them. To Jennifer and Michael. They had no idea. They thought Rachel was their only child. They thought I was dead or had never been created at all. And now, she laughed, but it was a broken, painful sound. "Now they want to meet me. They want me to come to Sacramento. They want to welcome their lost daughter home." "What about Rachel?" I asked. "How does she feel about all this?" "I haven't talked to her yet. But Jennifer said she's excited. She's always wanted a sister." "Isn't that funny? She's always wanted what I thought I had. Emma, you do have a sister. You have me." The silence on the other end of the line was devastating. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah, you're the person I grew up with. You're the person I shared a childhood with. And I love you for that. But genetically, we're not related at all. We don't share a single drop of blood. We're not half-sisters or even distant cousins. We're just Two people who happened to be raised in the same house. Tears were streaming down my face. That's not true. Mom carried you? She's your mother in every way that counts. And that makes us sisters, does it? Emma asked. Because she's not my biological mother, Sarah. She didn't give me her genes, her DNA. She was just ... A surrogate, I guess. An unwitting surrogate for Jennifer and Michael Reeves. Don't say that. Mom loved you. Dad loved you. I know they did. I do know that. But it doesn't change the facts. I have biological parents who want to know me. I have an identical twin sister. I have a genetic family that I've never met. And I think I need to meet them. I need to see where I come from. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was making a mistake, that family was more than genetics. But I couldn't. Because part of me understood. If I discovered I had a twin somewhere, wouldn't I want to meet them? Wouldn't I need to know? When are you going? I asked quietly. Next week. Jennifer invited me to stay with them for Thanksgiving. I know it's fast, but I just ... I can't be here for the holidays. I can't sit around Mom's table and pretend everything is normal. What should I tell Mom? Tell her the truth. Tell her I need time. Tell her I'm not angry anymore, I'm just ... lost, and I need to find myself. Emma did go to Sacramento. She sent me occasional text pictures of her with Rachel, who looked so much like her it was eerie. Updates about getting to know Jennifer and Michael. She sounded happy, or at least happier than she'd been. But there was a distance between us now that I didn't know how to bridge. I visited Mom regularly during that time. She was devastated by Emma's absence, but she tried to understand. She told me stories about Emma's childhood, about the bond they'd shared, as if by repeating them she could prove that biology didn't matter. And maybe she was right. Maybe it shouldn't matter. But it did matter to Emma. And I'd had to respect that. Meanwhile, I grappled with my own revelations. I joined the support group for Dr. Bennett's offspring. I met my half-siblings, a strange, sprawling family connected by one man's narcissism and violations. Some of them were angry. Some had made peace with it. Some were just curious. I found myself drawn to a woman named Grace, who was 2 years older than me and lived in Portland. We looked remarkably similar, and when we met for coffee, it was like looking into a slightly older mirror. It's weird, isn't it? Grace said, stirring sugar into her latte. Knowing we have the same biological father, but that he was basically a monster. I try not to think about him as a father, I admitted. My dad, the man who raised me, he was my real father. This Bennett guy was just ... A donor who didn't know he was supposed to be anonymous. Grace smiled sadly. That's a nice way of looking at it. I've had a harder time. My parents divorced when I found out. My dad couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't his biological daughter. It destroyed him. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. It's not any of our faults. But it does make me wonder, what was wrong with him? With Bennett? What kind of person does that to people? I'd wondered the same thing. I'd researched Dr. Lawrence Bennett, found old articles about his clinic, read testimonies from some of his victims. He'd been charming, apparently. Brilliant. He'd presented himself as a savior to couples struggling with infertility. But underneath it all, he'd been a narcissist who'd wanted to spread his genes as widely as possible. Who'd seen other people as vessels for his legacy. I think, I said slowly, that he didn't see us as real people. We were just extensions of himself, experiments. Maybe in his twisted mind he thought he was doing something good, creating life. But he didn't think about the consequences, about the families he was tearing apart. Grace nodded. Have you thought about meeting the others? There's a reunion being planned for next spring. Most of the siblings are going to be there. I hadn't decided yet. Part of me wanted to meet them, to understand this strange genetic family I'd inherited. But another part of me felt like I was betraying Dad by acknowledging Bennett as my biological father at all. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with Mom, just the two of us. The empty chair at the table, a physical reminder of Emma's absence. Mom made all of Emma's favorite dishes, and we both tried not to cry. Christmas was the same. Emma called on both holidays, her voice cheerful as she told us about the Reeves family traditions, about how much she and Rachel had in common, about how welcomed she felt. I was happy for her. I truly was. But I also felt like I was losing her. It was March when Emma finally came home to Spokane. She called me the day before and asked if I'd meet her at a coffee shop downtown. I drove over from Seattle with my stomach in knots, not knowing what to expect. She looked different. Not physically, she was still the same Emma, but there was something lighter about her, like a burden had been lifted. We hugged awkwardly and ordered our drinks, and then we sat across from each other in a corner booth, not sure where to start. "I've missed you," I said finally. "I've missed you too," Emma replied. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I just left. Sorry I pulled away. I was dealing with a lot and I didn't handle it well." "You don't have to apologize. What you are going through, it's unimaginable. I can't blame you for needing space." Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I needed to find them, you know? I needed to meet Jennifer and Michael and Rachel. I needed to see where I came from genetically. And it was good. It really was. They're wonderful people and she's amazing. We have so much in common, it's scary. We like the same books, the same music. We even have the same weird habit of organizing our closets by color." "That sounds beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "It is. But Sarah, here's what I realized. Genetics can tell you where you come from, but they can't tell you who you are. That's something you decide for yourself." And when I was with the Reeves family, even though I felt connected to them, I kept thinking about home. About Mom's terrible burnt cookies that she makes every Christmas. About the way you and I used to stay up late watching scary movies even though they gave me nightmares. About Dad teaching me to drive in that empty parking lot, both of us screaming when I almost hit a light pole. Tears were streaming down my face, but I was smiling. "You were such a bad driver." "I was terrible." Emma laughed through her own tears. "But Dad was so patient. He never gave up on me." And that's when I realized he was my dad. Richard Morrison was my father in every way that mattered. And Catherine Morrison is my mother. Not because we share DNA, but because they chose me. Every single day, they chose to love me and raise me and make me part of their family. And you, Sarah? You're my sister. Maybe not by blood, but by something deeper. By shared history. By love. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "You're my sister too. Always. I don't care what any DNA test says." I know that now. I needed to go find my biological family to realize that family isn't about genetics. It's about who shows up. Who stays. Who loves you when things get hard. Emma squeezed my hand. "I'm not going to disappear from Jennifer and Michael and Rachel's lives. They're important to me now. But this is my family. You and Mom. This is where I belong." We talked for hours that day, catching up on the months we'd been apart, healing the rift that had opened between us. Emma came home, moved back into her apartment in Spokane, and things slowly started to feel normal again. Or maybe not normal. Nothing would ever be exactly like it was before. But we found a new normal, one that acknowledged the complicated truths of our family while honoring the love that bound us together. Emma maintained a relationship with the Reeves family. She visited them regularly, and Rachel came to Spokane to meet us. It was strange at first, seeing Emma's identical twin, knowing that this woman was more genetically related to Emma than I was. But Rachel was kind and funny, and I found myself genuinely liking her. She never tried to replace me or claim Emma as solely hers. She understood that Emma had two families now, and she was content to be part of the new, expanded version. I never did attend the reunion for Dr. Bennett's offspring. I stayed in touch with Grace and a few others through Facebook, curious about my half-siblings, but not ready to make them a central part of my life. Maybe someday I would. But for now, I was content to focus on the family I'd always known. Mom was the happiest I'd seen her since Dad died when Emma came back. The three of us started having regular Sunday dinners, and slowly, we rebuilt the trust that had been fractured by secrets and lies. Mom apologized over and over for not telling us sooner, and eventually Emma and I forgave her. Because we understood that she'd been trying to protect us. Trying to preserve the family that Dad had wanted so desperately to have. 2 years after the DNA test that changed everything, I found myself standing in Mom's living room on Emma's wedding day. She was marrying a teacher she'd met at her school. A kind man who'd listened to her whole complicated story and loved her anyway. Rachel was there too, serving as one of Emma's bridesmaids alongside me. As I watched Emma in her wedding dress, radiant and happy, I thought about family and what it really means. We are not defined by our DNA. We are not the sum of our genes or the product of our biological parents. We are defined by the people who choose to love us, who stay with us through the hard times, who show up when it matters most. Emma and I might not share the same genetic code, but we share something more important. A lifetime of memories, of inside jokes, of tears and laughter and love. That's what makes us sisters. That's what makes us family. And if you're watching this, if you've stuck with me through this whole complicated, messy story, I want you to know that whatever your family looks like, whatever DNA tests might say, love is what matters. Biology can be important. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's not everything. The people who raised you, who loved you, who made you who you are, those are your real family. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family or your own identity, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own story if you feel comfortable. Let's create a space where we can talk about these complicated truths together. And if you found value in hearing my story, please consider liking this video and subscribing so you can hear more stories like this one, stories about the messy, beautiful reality of being human, of finding where we belong in a world that doesn't always make sense. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, family is what you make it.